Hello everyone, I am Priyanka Mondal, a PhD student at William and Mary, and I am advised by Professor Advait Nadkarni. In this video, I am going to talk about our work on understanding industry perspectives on IoT product security, compliance, and certification. Several regulatory initiatives such as the US Cyber Trust Mark have been announced to improve the IoT product security by maintaining proper security and privacy standards for IoT products. And therefore, these policy initiatives lead to an industry demand for product certification and a demand for IoT specific security standards from public and private sectors. Considering those policy initiatives, IoT vendor pay for the security assessment to the certification lab, and the certification lab evaluate the IoT product and assign the certification. This certification process is similar to the traditional security certification approach. That is, this certification model allow us to scale to certify millions of IoT products while lab doing all the work. But the regulators only license this certification lab based on some procedural criteria such as the number of employees and the testing facilities, but not their performance at finding vulnerabilities. This kind of unvalidated approach might lead to certified products that have not been properly analyzed and may still be vulnerable. Our prior work on IoT app security certification shows that this traditional certification model for IoT does not work. That is, the certified IoT products can have common vulnerabilities that are within the scope of the standards. However, we definitely need this IoT compliance certification model, and it is unknown how the IoT practitioners from industry, who are the primary stakeholders in this security certification, perceive, practice, and experience compliance certification. We aim to answer this question by conducting an interview study with IoT practitioners. In our interview study, we ask 5 research questions to investigate IoT practitioners' perspective, which are: how do IoT practitioners view product security? Next, what are the current practices in product security compliance certification for IoT devices? Next, how do practitioners perceive IoT security certification? And what are the challenges do practitioners face when pursuing IoT certification? Lastly, how do practitioners perceive liability in case of failures? We interviewed 17 IoT practitioners from diverse backgrounds to answer those research questions, and our analysis results in 16 findings. Now, I am going to discuss some of the interesting findings. First, let's talk about how budget and time impact security. Firstly, budget heavily impacts product security. For instance, a company cannot hire a security expert without proper budget. And when it comes to time, it also impacts security. That is, while participants from organizations focus on delivering secured product over deadline, independent contractors sometimes tend to prioritize deadline over security. And sometimes more time needs more budget. Finally, budget and time are big factors when a company wants to go for certification. That is, the time and budget constraint often restricted companies seeking security certification. Okay, we also found that the certification even more challenging for a small and medium scale organization because these SMEs have limited budget. They often lack security expertise. For instance, we had participants whose team does not even had a security expert for a long time. And SMEs may not have proper testing facilities. On the other hand, the market is very competitive. New products are coming every day, so they need to keep up with the market. Considering all these factors, if SMEs want to go for certification, what will happen? Well, an invitation to forum shopping. Forum shopping means that the SMEs will choose a lab that would do cheap and lightweight testing, and at the end of the day they can have a certified product but not secure products, and it can only provide false sense of security to consumers. Now let's see what we found about participants' knowledge and their practice about the certification. Even though most of our participants were not aware of IoT's specific security standards, they mentioned that they do certify their product, but those certifications are not IoT specific, more like general kind, for example ISO certification. However, participants are supporting to have IoT specific security standards and certification. They believe that the certification can give assurance to vendors and mostly consumers. On the other hand, um, our participants mostly think that the current certification process is not perfect and it may not improve the product security. Therefore, they are still hesitant to go for certification if it is not mandatory. Regardless, if the organization want to maintain proper security compliance for their product, participants think that the developer and lab both should be responsible for that, because the developers develop the product, so they need to make sure the product meet proper standard criteria during development phase. On the other hand, the lab should test the product rigorously. One of the interesting things we found here is that even though the participants use third-party libraries, knowing that those can have vulnerabilities, they are firmly against assuming any responsibility for the vulnerabilities found in the third-party libraries. Finally, if a vulnerability found in the certified products, who will be liable? Our participants think that the certification lab should be the most liable entity, because they did not do their job right. They should have found the vulnerability while testing the product. So the takeaways from this work are: the best way to handle the time and budget situation is planning it in advance. That is, if you want to do certification, you should prepare it at the beginning by involving a security expert and follow compliance and certification guidelines so that the products meet proper security standards. Next, to handle the forum shopping situation, the regulator, researcher, and practitioners need to make product security standards and regulation accessible to average developers at SMEs. And we have seen that the industry lacks confidence in IoT specific product security standards. Therefore, to improve the perception and adoption of IoT security compliance standards, the developer should be educated about the standards, and necessary tool and accessible information explanation should be available for them. And that comes to the last takeaway: the labs or developers, who is liable? It is hard to determine. There are so many variables involved, and therefore we need a clear legal framework for assigning liability in case of compliance failure. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to read the paper for more details and send us email if you have any questions.